Okay, in question 3, we're going to revisit this question again. Again, to calculate the equilibrium, the initial equilibrium right here, we've set the aggregate demand curve equal to the aggregate supply curve, the shortened aggregate supply curve. We solve for y, and we get $18.734 trillion. So we plug this value, which is equal to the potential GDP, because short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand both intersect at long run aggregate supply, 18.734. So we plug this value into the short aggregate supply curve, or we plug it into the aggregate demand curve, and we get 13.045. Okay, I went through and I labeled the diagram completely for the initial condition. We had the price level, short aggregate supply curve, the upward sloping line, longer aggregate supply, the vertical line, aggregate demand, initial, the black line, real GDP, 18.734 is the initial equilibrium. The initial equilibrium is at the price level of 13.045. So again, this is what you have to do for your homework memo. Label the diagram completely. I'll go ahead and erase it. The output gap is 0. Why is it 0? The output gap is 0 because potential GDP is 18.734, and real GDP, the intersection of short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand in the initial condition, is equal to potential. So output gap is 0. Because of that, the unemployment rate is equal to the natural unemployment rate. Check my work, and we get those right. Okay. In scenario 2, the aggregate demand curve, this one here, results from the Fed using its monetary policy tools to lower interest rates. So, if the Fed decides to lower its interest rates, or maybe perhaps it's keeping interest rates low for a long period of time, so it has set a low federal funds rate, and it does this by having a high money supply growth rate. And we'll get into this more later. So if it's set a low federal funds rate because it's got a high money supply growth rate, then that will overstimulate demand, because those two things cause interest rates, the nominal rate of interest, to fall. If inflation is constant, or does not change, right? Then the real rate of interest will fall. And that causes three things to happen. Consumption will rise because people buy that brand new car. Or it'll cause investment expenditures to rise, which is maybe an expansion of a factory or new home sales. Or exports will increase. Because people don't want the dollar, the demand for the dollar falls. Investors don't want the dollar because interest rates are low in the United States, ceteris paribus relative to the rest of the world. So demand for dollar falls. Et cetera, we talked about. Okay, so let me label the diagram here. I'll label the diagram. The new GDP level is 21.1 13.052. So let me label that green. I'm going to label it right here. 21.052. And the new price level is going to be maybe up here somewhere. 14.463. The old price level was 13.045, and the old GDP level was 18.734. Okay, I'll continue graphing it. So this right here is the 13. And this is the 14.463. I'll erase these down here. Whoop. Change this to black. 13.045. Erase that. And then we had the aggregate demand curve from scenario 1, long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, and then we had aggregate demand from scenario 2, which is a result of excessive monetary policy. And this value down here is equal to 21.052. So now we're in an inflationary gap because real GDP exceeds potential. So we're in an inflationary gap. Unemployment is low. And that puts upward pressures on nominal wage rates and prices of other inputs to production, like energy. So if nothing is done with fiscal policy or monetary policy, these two things will shift short and aggregate supply up to here. Because at this point, with the economy having such low unemployment, it's really hard for firms to hire new workers. So they're either working their employees overtime, or they're having to hire their employees away from other companies with better benefits or higher wages. Okay, I'll go ahead and erase all that and then finish answering the questions. Okay, so the economic growth rate from scenario 1 to scenario 2 is the percent change in GDP from here in scenario 1 to here in scenario 2. The inflation rate is the percent change from here in scenario 1 to here in scenario 2. So let me open up Excel. I'll go ahead and copy these two. Okay, that's real GDP, which we call Y. Then we have the price level, and the price level is 13.045. This is what it is in scenario 1. So this is black, and here is green, scenario 2. This is what it is, and this is what it was, right? So let's get the values. So this is what GDP is in scenario 2, and that's what the price level is in scenario 2. Okay, now we got to calculate the economic growth rate. And the economic growth rate, we've done this a bunch of times. It's the difference between what it is, what GDP is in scenario 2, and what it was in scenario 2. We take that difference and divide by what it was in scenario 1. Multiply that by 100. And the cool thing is, again, we can just pull this down to get the inflation rate. And the inflation rate is calculated by taking what the price level is in scenario 2, subtracting off what it was in scenario 2, dividing that difference by what it was in scenario 2, and then multiplying by 100. So we have a inflation rate of 10.870. We have an economic growth rate of 12.373. Again, in the this is called monetary inflation. In the classical school, percent change velocity is 0. So the percent change in the money supply, according to the equation of exchange, is the inflation rate plus the GDP, real GDP growth rate. So 23.243. Hit enter and see if we got the questions right. We should get them right. Okay, I had to go back and check. We want to round, in this question, answers to one decimal place. So I modified the decimal places to 12.4, 10.9, and 23.2. Then I re-hit enter and I got the correct answers. Okay, now down here in scenario 3, because the monetary actions of the Fed have caused blank rate, that would be the unemployment rate, to... Remember, the Fed puts us right here, right? Where unemployment is low. So this must be less than. Cause the unemployment rate to fall below. How about that? Fall below the natural unemployment rate. Because the unemployment rate is really low right here. This puts upward, as we said before, upward pressure on wages and nominal wages and the prices of other production inputs like energy. So mainstream economists argue that this will cause short and aggregate supply to shift upward as it does from black to red, as I mentioned earlier. So let's go ahead and hit enter and see if we got these questions right. Rate to fall below. Got to spell it right. Hit enter. There we go. Okay, so because of this situation where unemployment is too low, it fell below the natural rate of unemployment. That puts upward pressure on wages because unemployment is really, really low, and firms don't have a lot of choices when it comes to expanding its operations by hiring more employees. The pool of available workers is really small, so in that kind of situation, firms have to either pay, an overtime wage of time and a half, or they have to encourage workers from other firms to come to their firm by either offering them higher wages or maybe a better benefits package. Either way, that pushes up the cost of production, which increases the aggregate marginal cost or decreases short and aggregate supply. So let's go ahead and graph this situation. I'm going to kind of ignore this intermediate effect, this short run effect. We're going to go from the initial equilibrium to the final equilibrium. So let me go ahead and graph this. So we got the price level, we got real GDP, we got long run aggregate supply, we have short run aggregate supply from scenario 1 and 2. I'll just call it short run aggregate supply 1. We got aggregate demand from scenario 1. And then we have short run aggregate supply from scenario 3. Here's the equilibrium for scenario 3. Then we have the equilibrium from scenario 1. The price level for scenario 1 was 13.045, if I remember right. And the GDP at scenario 1 or at scenario 3 is equal to potential in either case, because short aggregate supply 1 and aggregate demand 1 cross at long run aggregate supply 18.734. In the end, in scenario 3, we end up here at this point, and that right there is where aggregate demand from scenario 2 and short run aggregate supply from scenario 3 meet, and they both meet at long run aggregate supply. So the output gap is 0. So it was 0 initially and it's 0 now. So what has happened here is the Fed's monetary policy causes only inflation. It has no effect in the long run on GDP, because GDP might have been boosted in the short run, but it comes right back to here over the long run. So it has no effect on GDP, but it does have an effect on the price level. Let me label the final price level. The final price level is 15.645. Okay, so we got everything labeled. Everything looks good. I just verified that the initial price level was 13.045. I'm going to go ahead and open up Excel, because I have to change the numbers. We're ignoring scenario 3, so I'm going to change this to scenario 2. I'm going to change it to scenario 3. So in scenario 3, the price level ends up being 15.645, and the GDP ends up back where it started at 18.734. So over the long run, we get no economic growth from overly stimulating the economy with excessive monetary growth. It's all inflation. So the inflation rate ends up being 19 point. Now I'm going to change this to 1 decimal place. So the inflation rate and the money growth rate end up being 19.9 each. So the economic growth rate is 0. Inflation rate is 19.9. Again, in the classical model, percent change in velocity is 0. So this inflation is from the excessive growth of money when the Fed stimulated the economy. Let me go ahead and erase all that stuff. Okay, so from the initial condition to scenario 3, the shifts in aggregate demand and short aggregate supply cause real GDP to not change, and the price level to increase. According to the quantity theory of money, 100% of the increase in the price level is caused by the growth in the money supply. And then for your homework, you'll have to, of course, screenshot the above diagrams, type answers to any open-ended question here, like right down here. And you'll have to do this problem down here in your homework. I'm not going to show you how to do it. I think I do a pretty good job of explaining how to do it down here. If you need help with it, just email me. So after you screenshot your diagrams above and label them completely, after you print them, you'll also want to do this down here. Okay? I'm going to hit enter to see if I got these answers correct. And it looks like I got everything correct.